Episode 48. Here we are, and it's been a strange week. I shall start off with a little personal news. So I had a little accident on a Saturday and wiped out in the middle of 8th Avenue, and I basically destroyed my left knee. So I've been hobbling around everywhere. Thought it was just like a random bruise, and then I looked down afterwards and realised it was a massive rip in my jeans and blood everywhere. So it was a little worse than I thought. But so yeah, so I've sort of lost a little bit of productivity just from hobbling and being stubborn. There's probably a business lesson in there somewhere, but I won't focus on that one right now. So that's me. But I haven't let it stop me, and I've been going on. I think I've had a real epiphany. I've known this for a while, but like I really have to delegate some stuff. And so I had like a little epiphany. I was like, those things that I know I need to do to move the business forward, but I just don't enjoy them. I don't want to do them. And I think that's part of the reason why it's holding me back. So again, like the perfectionist in me has been, sort of working overtime and thinking, everything has to be right, even like a job description or something. But now I'm like, oh, sod it. So I've sent it off to, I think I mentioned them before, iWorker. I'm going to see if they can find me this marketing assistant and hopefully a sales dev person. So we shall see on that front. But very coincidentally, I listened to an event online that the Queen's, it was QECD. So I want to say Queen's Economic and Commercial Development team here in New York put on today. And it was with the founder of Astorian, which is a B2B marketplace connecting building owners with service providers to make it easier for them to find contractors, basically. And so he grew this whole marketplace, and it's just been acquired. And he was talking a little bit about how he did that, the process he went through, and some of that was around hiring. So I asked a few questions to get his take, because I was very curious around, not only given the vast number of people that you can look through on Fiverr, on Upwork, on all of the different marketplaces, like how do you sift through, how do you find people, and then how do you work with them in order to get the most productivity that you can whilst treating them fairly, of course. So what he was saying in terms of hiring and identifying originally is, he's looking for people, like, not the cheapest. Like, don't go for the people who are charging, who say they can do something for $5 an hour, because they never can. And you have to be prepared to manage them. So don't think you can just give them something and let them go and run with it, because his phrase, and I really love this, I wrote it down, an ounce of explanation will save a pound of clarification. So, basically spend a little bit of time up front and it's going to save you in the long run, which makes a lot of sense. But he was saying that when he's looking for people and he's talking to them, he's basically trying to figure out three things. Are they competent? Can they do the job? Are they reliable? Are they going to do the job when they say they are? And are they confident? I.e., can they actually deliver on it with, without you having to interfere? And I guess also, and he didn't say this, but I've got to think, hopefully their confidence isn't so extreme that they go completely outside of their lane and go and do something they shouldn't do. So I thought that was interesting. And he said some of the ways that he tries to judge, especially, it's not just like one project, but it's either a big project or an ongoing thing. So maybe he wants them to be on his customer service team and working X number of hours a week, is that he will give them a little project to do, maybe an hour or two project, like paid, something that very closely mimics what they will be doing on a day-to-day basis, and that will then give him a sense of their working style. And then obviously it goes without saying, looking at portfolio, any prior work they can point to, and I presume to, even like you would do in the real world about a traditional office environment, pulling references if the project necessitates it. So there were a few insights. Somebody was also, I think it was the woman who leads QECD, she also suggested, and I've heard this before, running competition. So basically you say, this is the brief, anybody can apply, there's going to be a bounty, we will select the winner and the winner will receive, I'm making this up, $500. And so then you get all of these different perspectives in, you know, how they're tackling that project. And I've got to think that works really well for creative projects, anything where things can be interpreted differently. Or and creative could be visual design, it could be writing, strap lines, pitch decks potentially. That could be interesting. So that was one thing. And then in terms of the ongoing management, he was like, definitely give them some very defined guardrails, give them a standard operating procedure if you can, check in with them, but also, you know, nobody wants to be a micromanager. No, nobody wants to be a micromanager. So ultimately, the onus is on you to find somebody who can work independently, but know when they need clarification or when they should circle back, and for you to lead by example and check in when you think it makes sense, but leave them alone when it doesn't. And he said that he started off by hiring just one or two individual people. So he'd hired a developer in Romania, and then of course they have their networks, and so he ended up hiring 4 or 5 others in Romania. And so he ended up going to Romania and doing a training and talking, I guess, about the product and what they're looking to do. And then he hired somebody in, I think he said Belize, and then they ended up hiring a few other people. Then he went to Belize to train them out. And so, you know, you very quickly, again, because it's networks, isn't it? If they're enjoying what they're doing, they know other people, they're going to introduce them. Then you could very quickly have like a whole offshore team. I mean, that in itself is, that would be a whole different question, wouldn't it? About managing payroll and international employees in effect. But I guess maybe that's one of the plus sides of doing it through Fiverr and Upwork. I don't know that for certain, but I wonder if they then manage some of that. That would be interesting to look at. But it was a really interesting session, and a few other things really resonated with me too. And one was about getting early users, and in particular early revenue. He said it doesn't matter if your product is free. If it's no good, people won't use it. But if it is good, people will be prepared to pay for it. So you need to make that ask early. And that's definitely something that I'm really bad at. It's a confidence thing, because I'm always like, well, is it any good? I don't know. And now I'm getting there. Like, I feel more confident doing it for events and things. I think that's fine. Interestingly, I just found earlier today, I found a community, and it said they've only got 150 members, but there are 150 paying members. And I don't know how many are actually paying this, but the pricing on their website was $39 a month. I mean, that's $400 a year recurring. So let's just do the maths very quickly. I mean, 400 times 150. I mean, that's $60,000 a year. And there was a poll that I saw, or I guess like Alex Lieberman from Morning Brew posted a tweet, and he was like, how many founders do you think there are in the US? And he defined it as, literally the US, and then he had to have fewer than 500 employees. So guess how many do you think? And a lot of people are like, maybe 30,000, 40,000. And I thought, no, it's going to be higher than that. I guess 300,000. Anyway, the answer was 900,000. Now, obviously, you can define founder in all sorts of different ways. But, if you could, that was 150 people, just in that quick maths there, $60,000. Times that by 10, $600,000. That's still not even, that's a tiny, tiny fraction. And then you could break it out into, all different hubs and things. So there's definitely an opportunity. And like, I'm paying for startups.com, and that's $100. Well, that's $100 a month. So that's actually considerably more than $39. But is properly managed. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity there. My membership gets, virtual assistant. I get like all of these one-on-ones. In fact, I use one today. Big shout out to JD. I'm going on a complete tangent. But big shout out to JD, who's like a B2B SaaS expert for startups. And he walked me through like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and helped me understand really the power of it and how it works. And, if you've got a very clear sense of your target audience, the search filters and criteria that you can implement to really narrow down who to contact quickly. You can save it, and then you can use other tools alongside that to then try and overlay, like, for example, email addresses. So you might ping somebody on LinkedIn and then you might follow up with an email. And the great reminder was people need like 10 touch points before they buy. And so, you do need to be consistent in that. And yeah, so that was really interesting. So thank you very much, JD. That was really helpful. But yeah, so going back to, I should say the guy's name was Victor Hunt, who started the Historian and was going through all of that. But that was a great reminder. And then he was talking more about, grabbing people's attention. He said, obviously in ancient Egypt, they were using hieroglyphics, which are very visual, it's art, isn't it? They're grabbing people's attention with artwork. And today we use emojis. And that's how you can cut through a lot of noise, is to think visually. It doesn't mean everything has to be like smiley faces and thumbs up and things, of course. But it just reminds everybody that the visuals really count. And in fact, visuals probably count more than words. So, yeah, so be careful on that. Although on the flip side, I was listening to a podcast with Jason Calacanis earlier this week, and he said he did a deck and doesn't put any visuals in it. It's just words, because you can spend so long thinking about how it looks that it ends up being a distraction and you get stuck creating it. So I think there's hit and miss. I've actually seen some very effective decks with nothing but words, because I think it makes you really focus on the message you're trying to convey, because there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide behind that picture of the dog jumping up and catching the ball or whatever it might be. You've got to be really thoughtful about what you're saying to ensure that the message really lands. So I think there are pros and cons of that, but regardless, I think it's basically saying make sure that your message is very easily conveyed and think about how you can grab people's attention. And then in terms of finding your first customers, he was basically saying, look, be scrappy, use every opportunity that's open to you. Go to everybody in your network, go to friends of friends. If you regularly use a particular shop, maybe you want to ask them. Literally use any shortcuts that you can to start opening that wedge. What would make the most sense there? And actually, wedge is a term that's come up a few times in the last couple of weeks, because it came up in a panel at Tech Week last week too. It was like, basically, how do you get your foot in the door? Like, what is it that people are looking for that you can lean into in order to then sell them something else? So right now, obviously, everybody's talking about fundraising. Everybody's desperate to generate money. The market's different to how it's been over the last couple of years. So there are lots of people looking for funding. So, a wedge might be, if you did have a paying community, maybe you would lean into that and say, okay, we're really going to focus on grants, or we're really going to focus on non-dilutive alternative revenue streams like competitions, or like some accelerators, or those that are still handing out money, even though traditional VC might be a little bit tighter. Although I don't think that's necessarily true for pre-seed and idea stage. I think, yes, it is slowing, but I think there's still a load of investments from what I'm hearing. So I think there's a lot to be said there. So circling back, find your wedge. And yeah. And then I went to a founder breakfast this morning, and that was really interesting. And oh my God, it really resonated. It was with this guy. It's like Chatham House rules, so I won't say anything about who it was or the company, but it was a really interesting B2B SaaS. And in not too dissimilar space, actually, to Historian, in terms of like connecting companies with vendors. But anyway, what he was saying is that he's got people on his team who are the most effective people. Like, they're making all the calls they need to make, like making more, frankly, showing everybody up, but their close rate is atrocious. And it's because they're afraid to make the ask. I was like, that's me. I'm afraid to make the ask on pretty much everything. And so I was talking to John about this at the weekend, because like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm just like, it's that bloody fear of failure, fear of everything. it's half the time I'm afraid of my own shadow. I just need to get out of my head. So I just need to go, so what? And just make the damn asks. So I've got this list of people who held events, were either the host or had the space at Tech Week last week. That was put together actually by the virtual assistant that I get through startups.com. So shout out to Pam, thank you very much. But yes, I'm going to start going through all of that. And I'm also, as part of my hiring piece, going to see if they can start contacting different bars and restaurants. Because I think up to now I've been thinking that would be like an all day session. But I do think there's a lot of value in mini sessions. Maybe you meet for a breakfast, brainstorm over breakfast. Maybe there's a morning session, maybe there's an afternoon session. And that way you sort of lean into people's off-peak times. So for example, restaurants, they have private rooms. They're busy at lunch and they're busy at dinner, but like, what's happening with those rooms at the other time of the day? Probably nothing. And so then if we were able to use that space and then go straight into a happy hour afterwards, that would be a win for them, because they'd be getting brand awareness, they'd be getting people in there, and then they'd be generating sales from the drinks that were sold. And maybe people would buy food too. So I'm sort of looking at that and seeing what happens. So I've got lots of ideas right now and lots of things going on, and I need to just make the ask. So on that, I'm going to make a little ask here. If you have ever listened to this, and I hope you're listening to this right now, because otherwise I'm just talking to myself, please just forward this on to one other person. If you're listening to this, just send it to one person. And I'm going to put a link as well in for my link tree. So actually there's 2 asks. Oh my God. So I've got 2 asks. One, forward this podcast series to anybody else in the founder space who you think this might resonate with. And then 2, click on the link tree. And if you aren't already, then sign up for either WhatsApp, Slack, newsletter. But you don't have to worry about any of that because it's all in one place on my link tree, which I've suddenly discovered. I'm very late to the game, but it's proving very handy. So there we go. I'm making my ask. Those are the 2 things. It's the weekend. You all go have a great time.